Hi, Bother Brigade. Here's what's bothering me today. I've been wanting to rant about this for a couple weeks now, so forgive me if perhaps I'm a little more agitated than usual. So, lots of people, especially here in Canada, have had a great many things to say about what's going on with our airports and wait times and, what could be the problem? And certain people, conservatives, conspiracy theorists, sorry, I have something in my throat, blamed, it's about having to make them go through tests and having to quarantine and about the mask mandates and, you're not letting people travel, let the system start working for itself and all other kinds of terrible nonsense. But I am going to actually pop the lid off of everything that's going on right now because I used to be part of the industry, and so me not going back to it is directly contributing to this problem right now. Allow me to explain. So my job pre-pandemic was working as those people that you see around the aircraft, either offloading bags or loading bags on. You maybe see a couple of them waiting to clean out the inside of the aircraft after you leave the gangway, or what's known as the bridge that actually connects the aircraft to the main airport terminal. These are usually one or two crews that do these and a variety of other jobs, including pushing the aircraft back. I trained to do all of those because it's kind of like a job that you have to do all the time. And so someone maybe drives the tug for the first flight, and then someone else pushes back on the second flight. Someone else attaches the bridge on the third flight. You kind of change your job every day, right? So that's kind of what I was training to do. And there's lots of people who do this in-house. So Air Canada, I'm pretty sure, WestJet, they all have their own internal services. So you actually have to go and apply with that company, and they have their own branded equipment. But then there's others like Porter who use Swissport, which is a separate company that still does all that cargo handling stuff. So and they all come with different titles. For some, it's cargo handler, cargo attendant, station attendant, ramp attendant. It's basically something attendant or station or ramp. And basically your job is to make sure that the plane gets in safely, gets all the stuff offloaded safely, you clean it out safely, and then you get it ready for the next flight and push it away, and then you go on and do the next one, right? That's basically what that is. So that's what I was doing. But then, of course, the pandemic hit, and wouldn't you know it, all of a sudden, there's no flights anymore. I think I worked 3 sets of shifts before I was officially laid off. And that went for a lot of other people, but especially me and everyone else who's on the bottom rung of the totem pole. On top of this, right, you have people who are in a customer service capacity. And by customer service, I largely just mean the people who are giving tickets, taking your bags, stuff like that, right? On the front end of things. But there's also people on the back end, people in an actual office trying to deal with calls and whatnot. Lots of people throughout this industry were laid off when the world understandably shut down in 2020. The problem that no one's talking about is that a lot of these people, including yours truly, then went on to get other jobs. Crucially, better jobs. You know that really old and tired adage of, well, if you don't like it, just get a better job. Get a better job. And they use this as justification for why Wendy's employees don't deserve a living wage and stuff like this. Guess what? People finally listened to you, and they did that because thanks to CERB or finally having a break and new opportunities, people decided, you know what? Do I really want to go back and be yelled at by a customer who's really angry about his delayed flight to Cancun? Do I really want to go back out into minus 40 fucking temperatures with 80-kilometer-an-hour winds and deal with people's baggage in the freezing cold all day? Is that something I really want to do for, in many cases, minimum wage, right? So a lot of these people who were paid next to nothing and now also dealing with the cost of inflation and cost of living increasing and increasing, while also dealing with unappreciative customers and a very difficult, and especially in our case, fundamentally unsafe work environment. It's just you have to just follow as many safety protocols as possible, and that should hopefully do the trick. But it is a dangerous job. It's far more dangerous than being a cop. And guess what? When I went to become a courier, lots of other people were either, guess what, from my former work group, or we found out they were from other aspects. They were former flight attendants from WestJet and Air Canada and Porter. We had like ground mechanics and other like ramp attendants and station attendants from like Air Inuit and Canadian North and stuff like that. Like, people had decided, oh, you know what? Well, I still need something. So, hey, this place is hiring, because suddenly, guess what? With everyone staying home, the demand for, packages delivered to their front doorstep skyrocketed. So I got in as a courier, right place, right time. So with that in mind, right now, keep in mind, right? I'm just using myself as an example, but this applies to lots of other people. We were forced away from the jobs that we had and suddenly found newer, better jobs, right? So that's one element, just one, about what's causing these problems and these delays, is a lot of staff who were formerly employed are no longer going back, including, crucially, pilots. Before the pandemic, lots of companies, but especially the American ones like Delta, American Airlines, United, they were basically encouraging pilots to retire early, because past a certain age, you are not legally allowed to fly. So they had a sudden pilot shortage. And then again, basically giving exit clauses to their pensions and whatnot of, okay, well, the pandemic is hit. Do you want to retire now? So that's a lot more pilots retiring. But then it also brings us to a criminally underreported on story that's been going on, and it's still ongoing, by the way. The fact that Delta pilots have been on strike, protesting terrible working conditions and the fact that they have been reinfected with COVID-19 multiple times. And so they're showing up with, brain fog, and they're also showing up incredibly fatigued and tired and basically disabled, because this is a mass disabling event. They have been protesting. Oh, and side note, as of recording, United Airlines is renegotiating their contract with management, which means if that doesn't go the way, they could also suddenly join Delta airline pilots on the picket line, contributing to the problem. But they are understandably protesting correctly against the ongoing abuses, because guess what, people? The virus doesn't give a shit if we think it's done, and it's not done. And it doesn't just abide by 5 days, which again, Delta Airlines wanted. The best case scenario we have right now is that people can clear infection and be infectious to other people after 9 days. It's more common around day 10 or 11, but 9 is the absolute soonest we've seen so far. But unfortunately, Delta and many other airlines and companies are saying, nope, after 5 days, you got to come back. Which, again, keep in mind, right, we already have a reduced workforce on the front end, on the back end, in the aircraft, outside of the aircraft, below the aircraft, in the airport terminal. Already you are dealing with a lot fewer people because of, again, the industry wanting to kind of retire them early. And then on top of that, right, you now have a situation of mass infection, which has only been rendered worse by lifting mask mandates that people love to complain about. And so what's happened is people are still getting infected. So it doesn't matter that the, wait time is 5 days instead of 9, 10, 11, 12, whatever it may be. You are still dealing with an infectious goddamn new novel coronavirus. And that means that those people still have to be away and not be sick for at least 5 days, right? So, on top of existing labor shortages, you're now worsening the problem by continuing to pretend like the pandemic is over. So that's compounding those problems. What's also compounded the problem is that now finally, decades of problems are finally beginning to manifest on top of these issues. The main issues being, again, cost of living. Criminally underpaying lots of people, except for pilots. Flight attendants, for instance, do not actually get paid until the plane leaves the gate. Until, me or someone else who basically closes the door and pulls the bridge away, they do not get paid. So all those delays by customers throwing fits on, airplanes and protesting mask mandates and whatnot, the people on that flight are not being paid, and it's only worsening the situation for other customers while spreading infection, while amidst a labor shortage, right? So these are the various factors that are all contributing to the delays at the airports, right? And again, what we're seeing is that those who are still there, God bless y'all, are incredibly overworked and overstressed to the point that several here in Canada, no doubt elsewhere in the States and in Europe, etc., have collapsed due to exhaustion and had mental breakdowns due to the stress. So that's yet another person out of the game, and then someone else has to deal with, again, the long lines and abusive customers, all for pennies, while the cost of living continues to become more and more unaffordable with every passing day, basically. So, to sum up so far, we have striking pilots, the fact that the pandemic doesn't care that we think it's over, it's not over, and so us burying our heads in the sand is still leading to an already compounded labor shortage because of pre-existing policies by the airlines. So, that takes care of, like, the people-sided aspect of this. Let's delve into some other reasons why the delays are happening. So remember how I also mentioned at the start that I'm kind of partially to blame for this by, doing what people love to say on the internet is, well, if you don't like it, go and get a better job. Well, guess what? I did. And I got paid more for effectively doing less and in a far less dangerous environment. It's still dangerous because, working class, but it's definitely better than a lot of what's currently in that side of the industry. And a lot of other people have done the same thing over the course of this pandemic and also, understandably, don't want to get reinfected by the coronavirus time and time again. So the industry and its practices over the past decades also shares a big part of blame in what's leading to the current delays that we are seeing and experiencing. But I am so goddamn tired of the media ignoring this. Instead, I have to see politicians like Pierre Poilievre say, it's because, of mask mandates and, there's like stifling regulations and whatnot. We just need to stop that so that we can let things get back to normal. That's not how any of this fucking works. And on top of that, no one's actually pointing the blame at the industry, which has done these practices for decades without repercussion. Now it's starting to bite them in the ass. And then on top of that, no one in the media is talking about the pilot strike, why they're striking, why, again, so many people in that industry don't want to return to that industry, and why and how they left in the first place, both pre and at the start of the pandemic. These are all the things that are left out of this story so that people continue to think it's clearly, somehow the government's fault for why these things are happening, when really it's a byproduct of capitalism that people claim to enjoy, right? All those lovely stock buybacks that didn't actually go to raising worker wages and getting them better, more updated equipment and letting people retire when they ultimately wanted to, and actually training new pilots, because guess what? That used to be a hobby that's now become unaffordable for a great many people. So now they're, new pilots that they used to rely on, they aren't there anymore because the hobby's unaffordable. All the problems that I've talked about today are tied deeply within the capitalist system, and yet no one seems to connect the dots other than me on this issue. It's all about somehow regulation or mask mandates or testing at the airport. It's none of that. It has to do with labor malpractices since the 1980s, and it has to do with how they decided to basically stop everything in 2020. And that brings us to the final point. The other thing to blame here, and again why I had to mention capitalism before diving into this point, is that when they stopped all the flights and everything, they again went into capitalist mode, meaning, well, it's not making us money, so we're just going to get rid of it. So, not only did they, entice pilots to retire early, they got rid of equipment. They got rid of planes. So if you're wondering why suddenly there's delays and flights, blame the companies. They're the ones who got rid of staff and equipment and the aircraft themselves to satisfy their lovely stockholders so that they could then get bonuses at Christmas while the rest of us struggle on the goddamn daily. So the grim reality here is that the situation, which again, shameful and embarrassing and incredibly frustrating, is not the fault of testing at the airport. It's not because of mask mandates. It's not because of governments and regulation. It's because of capitalism and terrible business and labor practices. And it is because of steadfast refusal to do the right thing, which has resulted in a compounded labor shortage, which has now resulted in this lovely, terrible, perfect storm that is leaving thousands of people frustrated and stranded in airports. The pandemic is not over, and the sooner we and these companies realize that and actually have the media begin to talk about what's actually to blame here and what's going on, and then begin to work and propose solutions towards that, then this isn't getting any better. And the fact that I'm the only one talking about this after weeks of this being the story is definitely what's bothering me today.